The 50 most famous artworks by Pedro Pablo Rubens. Number 50. The Triumph of Judas Maccabeus. Circa 1635. Created in the 17th century AD, the Triumph of Judas Maccabeus represents a moment of profound symbolism and historical significance, framed within the Baroque movement that dominated Europe during this period. This masterpiece, attributed to Pedro Pablo Rubens, visually narrates the heroism of Judas Maccabeus, a crucial figure in the Jewish revolt against the Seleucids. Set in a period where art served as a tool to exalt religious and political values, Rubens here employs his characteristic visual drama to convey a narrative of struggle and redemption. The religious tensions of the 17th century gave contemporary relevance to this historical episode, endowing the work with a particular resonance with audiences of its time. Technically, this painting stands out for its masterful use of light and shadow, characteristic of Baroque chiaroscuro, which highlights the tense muscles and emotionally charged facial expressions of the protagonists. The warm, deep colors, combined with the dynamic composition, give the sensation of constant movement, encapsulating the exact moment of triumph. Every detail, from the armor reflecting the light to the folds of the waving banners, demonstrates Rubens' technical prowess and obsession with perfection in the representation of movement and texture. This work also stands as a key piece in the career of the painter, who during this period enjoyed unparalleled prestige in Europe. His ability to intertwine historical narratives with a profound sense of artistic theatricality consolidated his reputation as one of the great masters of the Baroque. The Triumph of Judas Maccabeus not only reflects his technical mastery, but also his ability to evoke deep emotions and connect with his audience. One remarkable fact is how Rubens managed to integrate elements of Christian iconography, such as the symbolism of divine victory, with precise historical details. The work functions not only as an epic tale, but also as a testament to the artistic abilities that defined an era in which art and religion were intrinsically connected. Number 49. The Fall of Icarus. Circa 1636. The Fall of Icarus, a work that encapsulates the tensions between human ambition and its limits, was executed around 1636, at the height of the 17th century AD. One of many reinterpretations of the Greek myth, this painting is attributed to the workshop of Pedro Pablo Rubens, although many scholars believe it may have been completed by one of his assistants. Inspired by the tale of Icarus, the young man who disobeyed his father's warnings by flying too close to the sun, the work acts as both a moral and aesthetic reflection on human excess and its consequences. Rubens uses his signature dynamic style to depict the critical moment of Icarus' fall. Broad, energetic brushstrokes highlight the contrast between the bright sky and the dark waters that greet the unfortunate young man. The warm tones of the sun and the cool tones of the waves in the background create a contrast that heightens the drama of the scene. The work is composed so that the viewer's gaze is drawn directly to Icarus as he descends, successfully conveying both the action and the impending tragedy in a single glance. The importance of this work lies in its ability to synthesize philosophical and artistic concepts within a powerful visual narrative. In Rubens' career, the Fall of Icarus represents yet another example of how he adapted classical mythological themes to the Baroque visual language, making them accessible and moving for his audience. The influence of his workshop on this work also highlights the importance of his legacy as a teacher, consolidating Antwerp as a center of artistic production in the 17th century. A fascinating detail of this painting is how it manages to integrate the moral message of the Icarus story into a Baroque visual context. The work not only tells a story, but serves as a visual warning against pride, a recurring theme in Christian and classical philosophy. Number 48. Landscape with rainbow. Circa 1636. In the 17th century AD, Rubens produced Landscape with a Rainbow, a work that, although seemingly serene, is charged with symbolism and technical mastery. This painting is situated within his prolific period of landscape production, in which the artist explored in greater depth the relationship between humans and nature. The scene represents an idealized pastoral landscape, where the rainbow, a symbol of hope and reconciliation, occupies a central place, visually connecting heaven with earth. Rubens employs a vibrant color palette and fluid brushwork to create a balance between natural and human elements. The carefully detailed sky blends into the terrain, conveying a sense of continuity. The animals scattered throughout the composition, along with peasants going about their daily work, add a narrative of harmony between man and nature, a recurring theme in his landscape work. Within his career, this painting stands out for being one of the few that places a rainbow as a central element, demonstrating Rubens' interest in natural phenomena and their symbolism. Although known primarily for his portraits and mythological compositions, this landscape highlights his versatility as an artist and his ability to capture deep emotions in seemingly simple settings. A curious detail of this work is how the rainbow, in addition to its symbolic function, also works as a technical resource to guide the viewer's gaze, connecting all parts of the landscape in a continuous cycle of visual exploration. Number 47. Portrait of Susanna London, Le Chapeau de Paille. Circa 1622 and 1625. Between 1622 and 1625, during the 17th century AD, Rubens painted Portrait of Susanna London, Le Chapeau de Paille, one of the most iconic works within his production of portraits. This painting, often praised for its freshness and naturalness, represents Susanna London, a woman of Flemish high society, dressed in an elegant hat that gives its name to the work. The portrait is notable for its intimate approach and the technical quality that Rubens applies in the representation of the textures and nuances of the skin and fabrics. The light falls on Susanna's face, creating a contrast that accentuates her delicate features. The hat, with its intricate details, demonstrates the artist's mastery in the representation of complex materials. The relaxed pose and serene expression of the model convey a sense of closeness uncommon in formal portraits of the period. In the context of his career, this work marks a moment of experimentation and refinement in the portrait genre. Rubens combines elements of naturalism with Baroque drama, creating a balanced composition that captures both the personality of the sitter and her social position. An interesting fact is how the hat, far from being a simple accessory, acts as a symbol of status and modernity, reflecting the fashion trends in 17th century Europe. Number 46. Equestrian Portrait of the Duke of Lerma. Circa 1603. The Equestrian Portrait of the Duke of Lerma, painted around 1603, during the 17th century AD, is one of Pedro Pablo Rubens' most representative works within the genre of equestrian portraits. This monumental painting celebrates the figure of Francisco Gómez de Sandoval y Rojas, Duke of Lerma, an influential Spanish politician of the time. The composition focuses on the Duke mounted on a majestic horse, whose posture denotes power and authority. Rubens uses a rich palette of warm tones to highlight the Duke's shining armor and the ornamental details of his attire. The figure of the horse, rendered with exceptional dynamism, reinforces the sense of movement and vitality in the scene. The background, with a serene but vibrant landscape, complements the majesty of the portrait without detracting from the central figure. This work not only celebrates the Duke as a political leader, but also reflects Rubens' talent for combining portraiture with symbolic narrative. Equestrian portraiture, popularized during the Renaissance, here reaches a new level of technical and emotional sophistication. A fascinating detail is how Rubens manages to convey both the Duke's personality and his social status through the interaction between the rider and his horse, establishing a perfect balance between power and elegance. Number 45. The Martyrdom of Saint Lavinius, circa 1633. Created circa 1633, the Martyrdom of Saint Lavinius captures a harrowing moment in church history. The painting, attributed to renowned artist Pedro Pablo Rubens, reflects the violence and religious fervor of the 17th century, a period marked by religious wars and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. Saint Lavinius, a 7th-century Christian missionary, is depicted in the act of martyrdom with a rawness that challenges the viewer to confront human suffering. Rubens manages to encapsulate both the tragedy and sublimity of sacrifice through a masterful handling of color, light, and dynamic composition, characteristics that have defined his artistic legacy. Technically, the work is notable for its diagonal composition, a technique used to draw attention to the central point of the drama, the moment of martyrdom. The contrasts between light and shadow, a trademark of the Baroque, heighten the drama and give the scene an almost theatrical depth. The use of red in the clothing and blood is symbolic, evoking both martyrdom and spiritual glory. Rubens, known for his skill in depicting movement, makes every figure and element seem to vibrate with life, from the tense faces of the executioners to the serene and resigned countenance of the saint. In the context of Rubens' career, this work represents his ability to combine religious narratives with unparalleled technical virtuosity. It was produced at a time when sacred art sought not only to instruct but to deeply move the faithful, and Rubens fulfilled this purpose in spades. The Martyrdom of Saint Lavinius is also notable for its monumental scale and meticulous attention to detail, from the textures of the fabrics to the architectural elements in the background. An interesting fact about this painting is that Rubens, in addition to being a master painter, was a diplomat and scholar deeply interested in religious history. His connection to hagiographical accounts was not superficial. He sought to bring them to life in a way that would resonate with both the common devotee and the cultural elite of his time. Number 44. Saint George and the Dragon, circa 1606 and 1608. Between 1606 and 1608, Pedro Pablo Rubens painted Saint George and the Dragon, one of the most iconic depictions of this Christian legend. The work encapsulates the struggle between good and evil, a recurring theme in 17th century art, especially in a context where the Catholic Church sought to reassert its moral supremacy against reformist currents. In the painting, Saint George, mounted on a spirited horse and covered in armor, confronts the dragon with a lance in a scene charged with tension and heroism. Rubens employs his characteristic mastery of chiaroscuro to dramatize the confrontation here. Light falls on the face of Saint George and his armor, symbolizing divine intervention in his victory. The dragon, rendered in astonishing detail in its scales and gaping jaws, seems to emerge from the shadows, a contrast that reinforces the dichotomy between light and dark. The artist's dynamic brushstrokes convey the frenetic movement of combat, and the background landscape, though secondary, provides an epic atmosphere that frames the action. The significance of this work in Rubens' career lies in its ability to fuse the narrative with the symbolic. Saint George is not just a warrior. He is a representation of the Christian ideal of faith and sacrifice. For Rubens, who moved between the European courts and was familiar with the political and religious tensions of the day, this painting could also be interpreted as a call to perseverance and victory in the face of adversity. It is interesting to note that Rubens drew on several artistic traditions for this work, incorporating both Renaissance and Baroque elements. For example, St. George's horse is reminiscent of Leonardo da Vinci's majestic equestrian figures, while the atmosphere charged with movement and emotion is purely Baroque, a hallmark of Rubens. Number 43. The Holy Women at the Sepulchre. Circa 1611 and 1614. Painted between 1611 and 1614, The Holy Women at the Sepulchre is a work that illustrates one of the most moving moments of the New Testament, the discovery of Christ's empty tomb. This painting, attributed to Pedro Pablo Rubens, stands out for its sensitivity and emotional depth, elements that the artist manages to convey through his characteristic handling of light and composition. The scene shows the three women who have come to Jesus' tomb, depicted with a mixture of wonder and devotion. The celestial luminosity that envelops the figures suggests the divine presence, a typical Baroque device to emphasize the supernatural. The triangular arrangement of the women directs the viewer's gaze toward the center of the composition, where an angel points to the empty tomb. The contrast between the women's dark clothes and the radiant whiteness of the angel intensifies the drama of the moment. For Rubens, this work was not only an expression of faith, but also a technical and emotional challenge. His ability to capture human vulnerability and transcendental hope is evident in the faces of the women, whose expressions convey both pain and joy. The attention to detail, from the folds of the garments to the texture of the tombstones, demonstrates the artist's technical mastery. A fascinating detail about this work is that Rubens, like many artists of his time, not only saw painting as a means of personal expression, but also as a tool for religious teaching. The Holy Women at the Sepulchre serves this purpose, inviting the viewer to reflect on the mystery of the resurrection and its meaning for the Christian faith. Number 42. Old Woman and Boy with Candles. Circa 1610. The work, Old Woman and Boy with Candles, created around 1610, is one of Pedro Pablo Rubens' most intimate and mysterious pieces. Unlike his large historical or religious compositions, this painting focuses on an everyday moment, but one that is loaded with symbolism. The scene shows an old woman holding a candle while a boy watches attentively, a gesture that seems simple, but invites multiple interpretations. Rubens uses a more restrained approach here in terms of composition and color. The candlelight takes center stage, illuminating the characters' faces with a realism that highlights the wrinkles of the old woman and the curiosity in the boy's eyes. Chiaroscuro, a technique that Rubens mastered to perfection, gives the scene an almost theatrical atmosphere, highlighting the contrasts between warm light and deep shadows. The symbolism of light and the figure of the old woman suggest a reflection on the passage of time, the transmission of wisdom, and the fragility of life. Although it is not a religious work in the strict sense, its message transcends the earthly, connecting with universal themes of mortality and legacy. A curious detail is that this painting, despite its apparent simplicity, demonstrates Rubens' ability to explore philosophical themes through domestic scenes. This makes it an exceptional work within his vast repertoire, which often focuses on grandiose and heroic themes. Number 41. The Miracle of St. Walburga. Circa 1610. The Miracle of St. Walburga, created circa 1610, is a work that combines Christian devotion with Baroque theatricality. The painting depicts one of the miracles attributed to St. Walburga, an 8th century saint venerated in Europe for her divine intercession. Rubens captures this event with a technical mastery that highlights both the humanity and the miraculousness of the moment. The composition is rich in detail, from the figure's gestures to the lighting effects that symbolize the divine presence. In the center of the scene, Saint Walburga is depicted with a serene countenance, surrounded by faithful who express wonder and gratitude. The use of color, especially in the golden and white tones, reinforces the idea of the sacred, while the deep shadows add an air of mystery. This work is a perfect example of how Rubens used his art to inspire devotion and convey the values of the Catholic faith. His ability to depict the interaction between the human and the divine is evident in the narrative details, such as the faces of the faithful and the gestures that guide the viewer's gaze towards the central figure of the saint. An interesting aspect of this painting is that it reflects not only Rubens' artistic prowess, but also his deep knowledge of Christian iconography. Every element, from the saint's clothing to the character's gestures, has a symbolic purpose, making this work worthy of admiration for both its beauty and its spiritual content. Number 40. Landscape with Steen Castle. Circa 1636. The landscape with Steen Castle, painted around 1636, is one of the most significant works of the 17th century created by the Flemish master Peter Paul Rubens. This painting captures the rural setting of the Belgian countryside with a majesty that transcends its time. The work displays a meticulous composition in which Steen Castle, acquired by Rubens himself, stands as the central axis of the scene. This landscape reflects not only the artist's technical mastery in the use of light and color, but also his deep emotional bond with nature and the environment that surrounded his retirement in the middle of his life. In technical terms, Rubens achieves a delicate balance between natural and architectural elements. The open skies and warm colors of the palette evoke a serene atmosphere, while the expressive brushstrokes endow the scene with dynamism and life. The interplay between areas of light and shadow guides the viewer's eye through a visual journey that begins at the castle and expands out to the fields and skies. This approach gives a sense of depth and monumental scale to the landscape, something uncommon in Flemish painting of his time. This work marks a major shift in Rubens' career, who by this period had distanced himself from the large religious and political commissions that defined much of his artistic career. Rather than continuing to explore the mythological and biblical narratives that made him famous, he focused on a more intimate and personal depiction of country life. The painting is in many ways a reflection of his desire to seek tranquility and to get away from the intense political life of Antwerp, where he played a diplomatic role for decades. An interesting detail is how Rubens includes small elements of everyday life in the painting, such as human figures working the land or animals grazing, which adds a layer of authenticity to the scene. These inclusions not only enrich the visual narrative, but also offer a valuable testimony to rural activities in the 17th century. The work is a visual ode to the harmonious relationship between man and nature, a theme that still resonates deeply today. Number 39. Self-portrait with his wife Isabella Brandt. Circa 1609 and 1610. The self-portrait with his wife Isabella Brandt, painted around 1609–10, is an intimate and highly symbolic work created by Peter Paul Rubens at the beginning of his marriage to Isabella Brandt. Painted during the 17th century, this double portrait not only captures the couple's union, but also sets a new standard in marital portraiture by combining technical virtuosity with a sincere depiction of affection and complicity. In this painting, Rubens depicts himself and Isabella under a pergola of honeysuckle, a symbol of love and fidelity in Flemish art. The composition is carefully balanced. The physical closeness between the two and their relaxed expressions convey a sense of intimacy and mutual trust. Rubens uses warm, rich colors, such as the golden and brown tones in the skin, and achieves an impressive level of detail in the textures of the fabrics and ornaments, evidencing his technical mastery. This self-portrait stands out in Rubens' career for its personal character and its innovation in the portrait genre. Although he was known for his great religious and mythological compositions, here Rubens explores a more human side, showing the couple in a moment of serenity and harmony. The work also reflects the painter's social status, evidenced by the elegant clothing and refined surroundings, although it does not neglect the warmth that defines his relationship with Isabella. A curious detail of this work is the symbolism of the intertwined hands, a representation of eternal union, as well as the use of the pergola as a natural frame to reinforce the idea of a blossoming love. This portrait not only captures the essence of their relationship, but also becomes a visual testimony to the romantic spirit of the 17th century, a work that continues to be admired for its honesty and technical mastery. Number 38. The Conversion of St. Paul. Circa 1612. The Conversion of St. Paul, created circa 1612, is one of Pedro Pablo Rubens' most intense and dynamic works, reflecting the dramatic ideals of the 17th century. Based on the biblical story from the New Testament, this painting captures the moment when Saul, the persecutor of Christians, experiences a divine epiphany on the road to Damascus, transforming into the Apostle Paul. Rubens captures this episode with a virtuosity that combines Baroque theatricality with a profound spiritual meaning. The scene is dominated by a dramatic play of light and shadow, which intensifies the emotional impact of the event. The use of chiaroscuro not only highlights the expressions of surprise and terror on the characters, but also directs the viewer's attention to the central figure of Saul, who lies fallen, blinded by the divine light. The rapid brushstrokes and the energy of the line lend movement and tension to the composition, making the moment seem alive and palpable. Technically, the work demonstrates Rubens' mastery of human anatomy, evident in the dynamic postures of the characters and the meticulous detailing of muscles and gestures. Each figure appears to actively participate in the scene, contributing to a cohesive and exciting visual narrative. Furthermore, the dark and stormy landscape reinforces the atmosphere of chaos and transformation. The significance of this painting lies in its ability to convey the universal message of redemption and change. As one of the most recurrent themes in religious art, the Conversion of St. Paul allowed Rubens to explore both the human and divine aspects of spiritual experience. This innovative approach not only cemented his reputation as a Baroque master, but also influenced later generations of artists. A fascinating detail of this work is how Rubens uses the position of the horse and the fall of Saul as a visual metaphor for his spiritual downfall and subsequent rebirth. This symbolism, together with the emotional intensity of the painting, makes The Conversion of St. Paul one of the most iconic pieces of 17th century Baroque art. Number 37. The Triumph of the Eucharist. Around the years 1625 and 1626. The Triumph of the Eucharist, painted around 1625 to 1626, is a monumental work that encapsulates Pedro Pablo Rubens's Baroque vision of the importance of the Catholic faith in the 17th century. This painting is part of a series of tapestries commissioned by the Infanta Isabel Clara Eugenia, with the purpose of glorifying the Eucharist and reinforcing the values of Catholicism during a period of intense religious conflict in Europe. In this work, Rubens displays his mastery of composition by organizing a complex scene in which allegorical figures, angels and saints converge in a heavenly celebration of the Eucharist. The chromatic richness and ornamental details stand out, especially in the costumes and accessories of the characters, which reflect the opulence and splendor associated with Catholic worship. The expressions of devotion and ecstasy on the faces of the figures add an emotional dimension that connects deeply with the viewer. Technically, The work demonstrates Rubens' talent for combining symbolic elements with a compelling visual narrative. The arrangement of the figures in a three-dimensional space, as well as the use of dynamic perspectives and diagonals, create a sense of movement and depth that amplifies the theatricality of the scene. The masterful handling of light, which seems to emanate from the center of the composition, guides the eye towards the Eucharistic chalice, a central symbol of the Christian faith. The impact of this work transcends its time, consolidating Rubens as an artistic defender of the Council of Trent and its emphasis on the power of religious images. An interesting detail is how Rubens uses the figure of the Infanta Isabel as inspiration for the main female figures, reinforcing the link between political and religious power. Number 36. The Annunciation. Circa 1609. The Annunciation, painted around 1609, is an iconic work by Pedro Pablo Rubens that exemplifies his unique interpretation of this biblical passage so often represented in art history. In this 17th century painting, Rubens captures the sublime moment when the angel Gabriel announces to Mary that she will be the mother of the Savior. The scene is imbued with a heavenly atmosphere that reflects both the spirituality and the Baroque drama characteristic of the artist. The composition is carefully constructed, with the angel Gabriel occupying the left side and Mary on the right, both illuminated by a beam of divine light descending from heaven. Warm and vibrant colors, such as gold and blue, create a contrast that highlights the purity of Mary and the majesty of the angel. Rubens uses expressive body language to convey Mary's humility and Gabriel's divine authority, achieving an immediate emotional connection with the viewer. This work is especially significant in Rubens' career because it represents one of his first explorations of religious themes of great emotional depth. Although he was already renowned for his mythological commissions, in The Annunciation, he demonstrates his ability to capture the essence of the sacred and the human in a single moment. The attention to detail, from the angel's feathers to the folds of Mary's cloak, demonstrates his technical virtuosity. A curious detail is how Rubens introduces subtle elements of symbolism, such as the white lily held by the angel, representing Mary's purity, and the open book, which alludes to the scriptures. These small touches enrich the work, making each observation reveal a new meaning. The Annunciation is not only an exquisite work of art, but also a powerful representation of Christian devotion. Number 35. The Martyrdom of Saint Andrew. Circa 1639. The Martyrdom of Saint Andrew, painted around 1639, is an emblematic work that captures the drama characteristic of Baroque art. This painting, attributed to the master José de Ribera, reflects an intense sensitivity towards human suffering, presented with striking realism. The historical context of its creation is set in the 17th century, a period marked by the Counter-Reformation, in which art was used as a means of spreading the ideals of the Catholic faith. In this environment, Ribera found a powerful visual language to convey devotion and sacrifice. In technical terms, the work is characterized by a masterful use of chiaroscuro. Deep shadows and intense highlights direct the viewer's attention to the center of the composition, Saint Andrew at the moment of his martyrdom. The artist used precise brushstrokes to highlight the texture of the skin, the folds of the garments, and the gestures of pain on the saint's face. This level of detail elevates the work to an almost tangible representation of sacrifice, establishing an emotional connection with the viewer. Within the scope of Ribera's career, this painting ranks as one of his most mature and thoughtful creations. His ability to combine narrative elements with psychological depth is evident here. The Martyrdom of Saint Andrew stands out not only for its impeccable technique, but also for its ability to inspire empathy, becoming a testament to the impact of the Baroque on religious devotion. A fascinating detail is the way Ribera manages to balance the physical and the spiritual in this work. Although the scene portrays a brutal act, the serene expression of St. Andrew seems to elevate him above earthly suffering, reinforcing the idea of divine redemption, a powerful and timeless message. Number 34. The Last Judgment, circa 1617. The Last Judgment, completed around 1617, is a work that encapsulates the magnificence and dynamism of the Baroque style at its finest. This painting, possibly by Pedro Pablo Rubens, reflects the cultural environment of the 17th century, a period when biblical narratives were used to expound moral and spiritual themes. In this work, Rubens depicts the separation between the righteous and the damned, a theme that resonated deeply in a Europe marked by religious divisions. The painting's composition is extraordinarily complex and dense, filled with figures in motion. Contrasts between light and shadow are essential in guiding the viewer's gaze to the key sections of the work. At the top, the angels and the chosen shine in a heavenly light, while the damned, at the bottom, are dragged into darkness. Rubens uses a vibrant palette of colors to highlight the muscular bodies, a hallmark of his style, which combines Baroque drama with an almost Renaissance exuberance. Within Rubens' artistic career, this work represents his absolute mastery of visual narrative. His ability to capture extreme emotions, from despair to hope, is evident in every face. The Last Judgment not only reaffirms his position as one of the great masters of the Baroque, but also demonstrates his ability to balance the divine and the human in a single composition. An intriguing detail about this work is how Rubens uses the dynamism of the figures to create a sense of controlled chaos, reinforcing the idea of divine judgment as a universal and momentous event. This combination of technique and narrative gives the painting a relevance that transcends its time. Number 33. The Meeting of Abraham and Melchizedek, circa 1625. The Meeting of Abraham and Melchizedek, painted around 1625, is a work that celebrates the encounter between two key biblical figures in an atmosphere charged with symbolism. Attributed to the Italian painter Guido Reni, this painting stands out for its delicacy and compositional balance, distinctive characteristics of the early Baroque. In the 17th century, this type of biblical narrative was used to convey messages of faith and divine hospitality, essential values of the time. Reni's technique shines through in the use of soft light that envelops the figures, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. Warm colors and soft lines contribute to a sense of harmony, while minute details, such as facial expressions and the folds of the clothing, add an additional level of realism. The contrast between Abraham's humility and Melchizedek's majesty reinforces the narrative of the work, emphasizing the sacred nature of the encounter. In the context of Reni's career, this painting stands out as a representation of his ability to capture spirituality without sacrificing formal beauty. The serenity and balance that characterize his style are reflected here with unmistakable clarity, cementing his legacy as one of the great exponents of Italian Baroque. A notable aspect of this work is how Reni uses the figure's gesture and gaze to tell the story. Although the characters are motionless, their interaction communicates a sense of movement and purpose, offering the viewer a deeply enriching visual and emotional experience. Number 32. Venus in Front of the Mirror, circa 1615. Venus Before the Mirror, painted around 1615, is a work that exemplifies the celebration of beauty and eroticism in 17th century art. Often attributed to Diego Velázquez, This painting captures the goddess Venus as she contemplates her reflection, symbolizing vanity and introspection. This historical period marked a boom in the depiction of mythological themes, reinterpreted with a humanistic and sensual approach. Velázquez's technique is unmatched in this work. The use of loose brushstrokes and a limited palette of earthy colors and warm tones creates a texture that seems almost tangible. The figure of Venus is illuminated by a soft light that highlights the curves of her body, while the mirror held by Cupid acts as a key compositional device, establishing a visual dialogue between the goddess and the viewer. In the context of Velázquez's career, this painting stands as an early example of his artistic genius, displaying his ability to capture both physical form and emotional depth. Venus before the mirror is distinguished from other mythological works by its intimacy and its focus on the female figure, an innovation in the art of the period. A fascinating detail of the painting is the ambiguity of the reflection in the mirror, which seems to look directly at the viewer. This subtle interaction breaks the fourth wall, inviting a reflection on the act of looking and being looked at, a theme that remains relevant in contemporary art criticism. Number 31. The Fall of the Damned. Circa 1620. The Fall of the Damned, created circa 1620, is a work that captures the horror and dynamism of eternal punishment. Attributed to Pedro Pablo Rubens, this painting is set in the 17th century, a time when art sought to shock and move the viewer, especially in religious themes. The scene depicts the damned being dragged towards hell by demons, a theme that resonates with the Christian vision of divine justice. Rubens uses a chaotic yet controlled composition, filled with figures in motion. Vigorous brushstrokes and intense colors convey an energy that seems to overflow the boundaries of the canvas. The tension in the muscles of the bodies, the expressions of despair and the twisted forms reinforce the feeling of torment, while the contrast between heavenly light and hellish shadows guides the visual narrative. In Rubens' career, this work is a testament to his technical mastery and his ability to combine the grotesque with the sublime. The Fall of the Damned stands out not only for its visual impact, but also for its ability to provoke a visceral reaction in the viewer, fulfilling the Counter-Reformation's goals of reaffirming faith through art. A remarkable fact about this painting is how Rubens manages to capture both terror and beauty in a single scene. This balance between chaos and aesthetics reinforces the idea that even in condemnation, there is a divine order, a reflection that has kept this work relevant throughout the centuries. Number 30. Peace and War. Around the years 1629 and 1630, the painting Peace and War, made by Pedro Pablo Rubens between 1629 and 1630, is a Baroque masterpiece that reflects not only the Flemish painter's technical skill, but also his interest in transmitting political and social messages through art. This painting, commissioned in the context of the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, presents an allegory in which peace, represented as a voluptuous and radiant female figure, is surrounded by symbols of abundance, while war, embodied by robust male figures and scattered weapons, is shown as a destructive force that threatens the well-being of humanity. Rubens employs a characteristic Baroque style, marked by dynamic compositions and the masterful use of light and shadow to give volume to the figures. The energetic brushstrokes and rich colors emphasize the contrast between the two conflicting forces, serenity and violence. The central figure of peace holds a cornucopia, while around her appear children playing, peaceful animals and abundant fruits. In contrast, war is represented with more angular lines, dark tones and figures in movement, which reinforce its chaotic nature. This work was a diplomatic gift from Rubens to King Charles I of England, an action that sought to foster peaceful relations between European nations. As a diplomat, Rubens understood the power of art as a tool to communicate ideals and build bridges between different cultures and political contexts. Therefore, Peace and War is not only an artistic piece, but also a historical document that reflects the tensions and aspirations of the 17th century. A fascinating fact is that Rubens produced this work while traveling between European courts as an emissary. His ability to combine his role as artist and diplomat gave him a unique place in art history, showing how his mastery transcended the canvas. In this sense, Peace and War captures not only a conflict of his time, but also the hope of overcoming it. Number 29. The Head of Medusa, circa 1617 and 1618. Caravaggio, a master of chiaroscuro, created the haunting, The Head of Medusa, between 1617 and 1618. Depicting the exact moment of Medusa's decapitation, this work is not only a testament to the artist's technical virtuosity, but also an example of his ability to capture emotional intensity in a mythological narrative. Painted on a convex shield, this technical choice gives the work a unique three-dimensionality, making the image seem to emerge towards the viewer. The figure of Medusa, her face filled with terror and pain at the moment of her death, is surrounded by living snakes emerging from her hair. Her glassy eyes, open mouth and blood flowing from her neck are captured with disturbing realism, while Caravaggio's chiaroscuro technique adds unmistakable drama. The lighting seems to come from a single point, highlighting the most terrifying details and leaving the surroundings in semi-darkness. This contrast underlines the horror of the scene and the artist's virtuosity in manipulating light. The historical context of this work is linked to the growing explorations of classical mythology during the late Renaissance and Baroque. In this period, Greek myths were interpreted as metaphors for human emotions and ethical dilemmas. In the case of Medusa, Caravaggio reflects both her monstrosity and her humanity, allowing the viewer to contemplate the paradox of beauty in horror. An interesting detail is that the shield that the work contains was created for the Grand Duke of Tuscany, Ferdinando II de' Medici, as a piece intended to decorate a ceremonial suit of armor. Thus, this work combines functionality with artistic expression, highlighting how art in this period served multiple purposes. The intensity of The Head of Medusa continues to capture viewers, making each encounter with it unforgettable. Number 28. The Battle of the Lapiths and the Centaurs, circa 1636 and 1637. The painting, The Battle of the Lapiths and the Centaurs, created by Pedro Pablo Rubens between 1636 and 1637, is a display of movement, force, and chaos that captures the climax of a classical Greek myth. Inspired by Ovid's account in The Metamorphoses, this painting depicts the epic battle that takes place during a wedding, where the centaurs attempt to kidnap the Lapiths' wives, triggering a violent confrontation. Rubens succeeds in conveying the intensity of the conflict through his mastery of dynamism in the composition. The human and centaur figures intertwine in complex postures, giving the impression that the fight continues beyond the boundaries of the canvas. The use of alternating warm and cool colors, together with energetic brushstrokes, accentuate the frenzy of the scene. Each character is charged with expression, from the gestures of anger and terror to the determination and heroism of the Lapiths. This work was part of a series of mythological paintings commissioned by Philip IV of Spain to decorate the Hall of Realms at the Buen Retiro Palace in Madrid. These pieces not only showcased Rubens' artistic skills, but also the ability of art to glorify power and order in times of political instability. Through this mythological narrative, Rubens explores the struggle between civilization and barbarism, recurring themes in his work. An interesting fact is that Rubens did not work alone on this series, but supervised a workshop that helped him execute parts of the works. However, the quality of his personal touch on the main figures is unmistakable, leaving his indelible mark on this piece charged with tension and energy. Number 27. The Last Supper. Around the years 1631 and 1632, Nicolas Poussin, one of the leading exponents of classicism, painted the Last Supper between 1631 and 1632, reinterpreting this biblical theme from a sober and balanced perspective. In this work, Poussin moves away from the excessive drama characteristic of the Baroque, opting instead for a more restrained and reflective representation of the scene in which Jesus shares his last meal with his disciples before his crucifixion. The composition is carefully structured, with the apostles arranged around a long table that draws the eye towards the center, where Christ, illuminated by a soft glow, blesses the bread and wine. The color palette is dominated by earthy and golden tones that reinforce the solemn character of the scene, while the classical architecture in the background evokes a sense of eternity and stability. The work reflects the influence of Italian Renaissance painting on Poussin, particularly artists such as Raphael, but also evidences his own sensitivity to order and rationality. Each figure is carefully placed, and their gestures and expressions convey both surprise and devotion, underscoring the moment when Jesus announces the betrayal that is to come. A fascinating detail of this work is how Poussin uses lighting to differentiate Christ from the others. Although all the characters are bathed in a general light, the glow around Jesus is warmer and more subtle, highlighting his divinity and his central role in the Christian narrative. Number 26. The Miracle of Fishing. Circa 1618. The Miracle of Fishing, painted by Jacopo Bassano in 1618, is a stunning example of late mannerism that combines spirituality with an almost everyday atmosphere. Depicting the moment when Jesus instructs his disciples to cast their nets and catch an unexpected bounty, this work captures the miracle with a mix of realism and theatricality. The canvas is dominated by a wide landscape full of natural details, from the movement of the water to the cloudy sky that seems to announce an imminent change. The disciples, in humble clothes and expressions of astonishment, work together to raise the nets loaded with fish. The figure of Jesus, placed slightly apart but clearly identifiable by his serene posture, is presented as a central figure that radiates calm and authority. Color and light play an essential role in this work. The blue and green tones of the water and sky contrast with the warm yellows and reds of the clothing, creating a visual balance that draws the viewer's attention to the key elements of the composition. Bassano also shows particular interest in details, such as the bright fish in the net and the textures of the oars and boats, which lend realism to the scene. An interesting curiosity is that this work was created for a local church in Bassano del Grappa, the artist's hometown, reflecting his personal connection to the community. Through this painting, Bassano not only celebrates a biblical miracle, but also invites the viewer to reflect on the power of faith and the reward of divine obedience. Number 25. Diana the Huntress. Circa 1615. The work, Diana the Huntress, created around 1615, is one of the most emblematic pieces that portray the mythological ideal of the Roman goddess Diana. In the context of the 17th century, this painting reflects the Renaissance and Baroque interest in reinterpreting classical mythology, but with a technical and symbolic approach that went beyond simple representation. In this period, European art was deeply influenced by a revival of Greco-Roman themes, fused with a rich tradition of illumination and theatricality typical of the nascent Baroque. Technically, the work stands out for its masterful use of chiaroscuro, where the central figure of Diana emerges from a dark background, highlighting her silhouette with golden lights that evoke a divine atmosphere. Every detail, from the metallic shine of her quiver to the texture of her clothing, demonstrates a technical mastery of oil painting. The composition directs the eye to the bow that Diana holds, a symbol of her role as a hunter and protector, while the surrounding animals and vegetation reinforce the goddess's link with nature. In the artist's career, this work occupies a prominent place, not only for its technical virtuosity, but also for the way it managed to humanize a mythological figure. Diana is not simply a distant goddess. Here she is presented with a balance between strength and serenity, suggesting a more accessible connection with the viewer. The choice to represent this moment of calm before the action reinforces the artist's ability to capture complex narratives in a single scene. One detail that does not go unnoticed is the use of color, particularly warm tones that contrast with the dark surroundings. This contrast, typical of the Baroque, intensifies the theatricality of the scene, transporting the viewer to a world between the earthly and the divine. Diana the Huntress is not only a technical masterpiece, but a portal into an era's fascination with mythological tales and their artistic reinterpretation. Number 24. The Assumption of the Virgin. Circa 1626. Created in 1626, The Assumption of the Virgin is a work that exemplifies the deep connection between religious faith and art in the 17th century. In a period when the Counter-Reformation movement sought to inspire devotion through art, this painting stands as a prominent example of sacred art that combines majesty and spiritual transcendence. The scene depicts the moment when the Virgin Mary is raised to heaven, surrounded by angels and enveloped in a heavenly atmosphere that symbolizes divine glory. The composition is a marvel of visual harmony, with an ascending structure that guides the gaze from the earthly faithful below to the radiant figure of the Virgin above. The author used a palette of vibrant colors, predominantly blue, gold, and white, to create a feeling of light and purity. The use of brushstrokes and the play of light and shadow reinforce the idea of a space that transcends the human, transporting the viewer to a moment of sublime revelation. This work marked a high point in the painter's career, showing his ability to balance the narrative requirements of the Church with his own artistic style. The delicacy with which the folds of the vestments have been rendered, as well as the serene expression of the Virgin, reveal an exceptional sensitivity to express deep emotions. The influence of this piece extended beyond its original context, serving as an inspiration for other religious artists of the time. A fascinating detail is the treatment of the angels' faces, each with a unique expression that suggests different facets of heavenly joy. This meticulous focus on human details within a divine narrative makes The Assumption of the Virgin a work that masterfully captures both the spiritual and the earthly. Number 23. The Earthly Paradise with the Fall of Man. Circa 1615. Painted around 1615, The Earthly Paradise with the Fall of Man is a work that combines natural beauty and a profound moral message. Set in Eden, this painting portrays the pivotal moment when Adam and Eve succumb to temptation, surrounded by a setting of natural splendor that reflects the perfection of divine creation. In the 17th century, depictions of paradise were both an exploration of nature and a reminder of human frailty. The artist displays an impressive mastery of composition, placing Adam and Eve in the center, beneath the tree of knowledge, while the details of the surroundings, the lush vegetation, the exotic animals, and the meandering river, envelop the protagonists in a world of life and abundance. The contrast between the serenity of the landscape and the act of disobedience adds an emotional and philosophical dimension to the scene. This work is not only a technical achievement, but also a reflection on the human condition. The use of vibrant colors and attention to detail in each natural element reflect a deep knowledge of anatomy and botany, adding authenticity to the landscape. In addition, the snake, a symbol of sin, is painted with a level of detail that intensifies its ominous presence in the painting. The impact of this work on art history is indisputable, as it strikes a balance between religious symbolism and the representation of nature. When contemplating the painting, the viewer is invited not only to admire its beauty, but also to reflect on the consequences of human decisions. The earthly paradise with the fall of man remains a central piece in the artistic exploration of biblical themes. Number 22. The Birth of the Milky Way, circa 1636 and 1637. Created between 1636 and 1637, The Birth of the Milky Way is a work that blends mythology and science in a fascinating way. Inspired by the Greek myth that tells of the origin of the Milky Way from the milk spilled by Hera, this painting becomes a celebration of the cosmos and human imagination in the 17th century. In an era where art and science were beginning to dialogue, this work stands out for its bold representation of celestial themes. The composition features Hera at the center, with an expression of wonder as milk gushes from her breast, transforming into a luminous river that meanders toward the sky. The colors used are ethereal, with shades of pearly white, deep blue, and gold that capture the majesty of celestial space. Around, mythological figures and stars intertwine, creating a scene that is both intimate and expansive. For the artist, this work represented a technical and conceptual challenge, as he managed to combine the dynamic movement of the Baroque with a subject charged with symbolism. The precision in the anatomical details of the mythological figures, together with the delicacy in the treatment of celestial textures, demonstrates a remarkable virtuosity. This painting is also a testament to the interest of the time in understanding the universe, incorporating elements that celebrate both mythology and astronomical observation. A curious detail of this work is the way the stars are represented as almost palpable flashes of light, which gives the scene a magical and tangible quality. The Birth of the Milky Way is not only a work of art, but a bridge between worlds, where the earthly and the cosmic converge in a unique visual narrative. Number 21. The Miracles of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, from the year 1617 to the year 1618. Between 1617 and 1618, the Miracles of Saint Ignatius of Loyola was created to honor the founder of the Society of Jesus and highlight the wonders associated with his saintliness. At the height of the Baroque, this work served as an instrument of the Church to inspire faith and devotion, using visual theatricality to capture the attention of the faithful. Each element in the painting is carefully designed to convey the greatness of the miracles performed by Saint Ignatius. The main scene shows Saint Ignatius in a gesture of intercession, surrounded by figures representing people healed by his divine intervention. The dynamism of the composition is characteristic of the Baroque, with diagonal lines and dramatic lighting reinforcing the miraculous character of the events portrayed. The warm color palette and the heavenly light effects around the saint contribute to creating an atmosphere of sacredness. In the author's career, this work was an outstanding example of how art could serve as a tool for the Counter-Reformation. It was not just about depicting miracles, but doing so in a way that would move and convince the viewer of divine intervention. The attention to detail in the characters' expressions, from amazement to gratitude, adds a human dimension that connects the viewer to the narrative. An intriguing aspect of the painting is the inclusion of symbolic elements, such as St. Ignatius' pilgrim's staff, which reinforce his image as a spiritual guide. The Miracles of St. Ignatius of Loyola is a work that continues to inspire, not only for its technical excellence, but for the emotional and spiritual strength that emanates from its composition. Number 20. The Wedding of Peleus and Thetis. Circa 1636. In the context of the 17th century, the wedding of Peleus and Thetis emerges as a pictorial testimony to the height of the Baroque, an era characterized by ornamental richness and the exaltation of emotions in art. This work was created in 1636 by the Flemish painter Jacob Jordaens, a disciple and contemporary of Pedro Pablo Rubens, who set the course for European painting. Inspired by Greek mythology, the painting portrays the wedding between the mortal Peleus and the Nereid Thetis, parents of the legendary Achilles. In this work, Jordaens employs an exuberant visual language, saturated with warm colors and dynamic compositions that emphasize the festive and transcendental nature of the event. Technically, the use of chiaroscuro and light contrasts are fundamental to the visual narrative. The main figures, placed in the center, are illuminated by a spotlight that highlights their facial expressions and movements. This resource generates a theatrical atmosphere that directs the viewer's attention to the symbolic details present in the scene: the Olympian deities, the dancing fauns, and the nymphs surrounding the couple. Jordaens' brush glides masterfully to give the fabrics, fruits, and landscapes an almost palpable texture, achieving a sense of depth that adds a scenic dimension to the work. The significance of the marriage of Peleus and Thetis is not limited to its impeccable technical execution. This painting encapsulates the influence of Rubens on Jordaens, who adopted and adapted his master's monumental style to develop an artistic voice of his own. In this work, Jordaens not only depicts a mythological scene, but also explores universal themes such as the celebration of life, union, and destiny. His ability to integrate mythological elements with an accessible visual language positioned him as one of the great exponents of Flemish Baroque art. A fascinating detail of this work is the presence of small elements that allude to the fragility of the moment: fruits about to fall from tables and furtive glances between the guests. These details invite the viewer to reflect on the tension between the ephemeral and the eternal, a duality that defines the Baroque in its purest essence. Number 19. The Death of Seneca. Circa 1615. Created during the early 17th century, The Death of Seneca reflects a profound meditation on Stoic philosophy and the tragic end of the famous Roman thinker Seneca. This work by the Spanish painter José de Ribera, known as El Españoleto, captures a moment of intense emotional charge in historical narrative: Seneca's forced suicide under the orders of the Emperor Nero. Ribera, faithful to Baroque drama, places the scene in a dark and austere environment that contrasts with the luminosity of the philosopher's body, which seems to radiate a tragic serenity. In technical terms, Ribera makes masterful use of tenebrism, a technique he learned under the influence of Caravaggio. The light highlights Seneca's aging musculature, echoing the physical and spiritual tension of his final moments. The thick strokes and earthy tones give the canvas an almost sculptural texture, underlining the vulnerability of the human body in the face of the impositions of power. Through a raw and realistic approach, Ribera does not idealize Seneca, but rather humanizes him, endowing the work with a striking authenticity. The importance of this painting in Ribera's career lies in its ability to combine narrative, philosophical, and visual elements in a single canvas. The Death of Seneca becomes a bridge between art and reflection, evoking questions about dignity, sacrifice, and morality in times of oppression. This work consolidated Ribera as one of the great masters of the Spanish Golden Age, with an artistic approach that influenced later generations. A detail that invites contemplation is Seneca's fixed gaze, directed towards a point outside the frame. This resource creates an implicit dialogue between the philosopher and the spectator, who becomes a witness to a lesson in fortitude in the face of adversity. Number 18. Self-portrait with his wife and son. Circa 1638. Set against the vibrant backdrop of the 17th century, self-portrait with wife and child marks an introspective turn in Jacob Jourdain's oeuvre. Unlike his larger mythological and religious compositions, this intimate painting reflects the artist's personal world, highlighting the balance between the domestic and the professional. Painted in 1638, this self-portrait offers a window into the everyday life of Jourdains, who is depicted alongside his wife Catharina van Noort and their son. The work conveys a mix of familial affection and artistic pride, encapsulating a moment of harmony in his life. Technically, the painting stands out for its warm color palette and subtle use of chiaroscuro to model faces and textures. Jourdains combines meticulous attention to detail, such as fabrics and trim, with a looser brushstroke in the background, creating a contrast that draws the eye towards the protagonists. The gestures and expressions of the characters are particularly noteworthy, as they convey a sense of authenticity and emotional closeness that was uncommon at the time. The significance of this self-portrait lies in its ability to humanize the artist, presenting him not only as a creator, but also as a husband and father. This intimate approach adds a personal dimension to Jourdain's work, setting it apart from his more grandiloquent compositions. At the same time, the painting evidences his technical mastery and his ability to capture both the individual essence and the emotional connection between the figures. A curious detail is the inclusion of a book in Catharina's hands, a symbol of wisdom and stability, which contrasts with the child's relaxed posture, representing generational continuity and family legacy. Number 17. The Four Continents. Circa 1615. The Four Continents, painted in 1615, is a monumental work by Pedro Pablo Rubens that reflects the Eurocentric worldview of the 17th century. This allegorical painting depicts Europe, Asia, Africa, and America as female figures surrounded by exotic animals and symbolic elements that allude to the riches and characteristics of each region. The work stands out for its visual opulence and dynamic composition, distinctive features of Rubens' Baroque style. The use of vibrant colors and luminous contrasts gives the scene a sense of vitality and movement. Each continent is represented with unique attributes: Europe, as a center of knowledge and power; Asia, with references to spirituality and spices; Africa, surrounded by wild fauna; and America, accompanied by flora and animals unknown to Europeans of the time. Rubens combines mythological and natural elements to create a visual narrative that exalts the diversity and richness of the known world. This work is significant in Rubens' career because it synthesizes his interest in mythology, geography, and politics. It also reflects the curiosity and desire for exploration that defined the 17th century, a period marked by European colonial expansion. Through The Four Continents, Rubens not only celebrates cultural diversity, but also legitimizes the imperialist vision of his time, making the work a historical and artistic document of great value. An intriguing detail is the interaction between the figures and the animals, which seem to engage in a cosmic dance. This element adds a playful dimension to the work, inviting the viewer to discover new layers of meaning with each observation. Number 16. The triumphal entry of Henry IV into Paris. from 1627 to 1630. Painted between 1627 and 1630, Pedro Pablo Rubens, the triumphal entry of Henry IV into Paris is a grand work that celebrates a pivotal moment in French history. This painting is part of a series commissioned by Marie de Medici to commemorate the life and achievements of her husband, King Henry IV. In this work, Rubens combines historical realism with mythological allegory, depicting Henry IV as a victorious hero returning to Paris after consolidating his power and pacifying the kingdom. The composition is characterized by its monumentality and dynamism, with figures that seem to move to the rhythm of a triumphal procession. Rubens uses a rich palette of golds, reds, and blues to convey the majesty of the event. The central figure of the king, enveloped in a heavenly glow, is surrounded by soldiers, citizens, and allegorical figures representing peace and prosperity. This approach gives the work an almost theatrical dimension, capturing both the emotion of the moment and its historical significance. In the context of Rubens' career, this painting is an example of his ability to fuse history and mythology, creating works that transcend the merely decorative. It also reflects his mastery of space and visual narrative, consolidating him as one of the most influential artists of his time. A fascinating detail is the inclusion of small gestures and expressions on the faces of the secondary characters, which add emotional depth to the scene and reveal Rubens' ability to capture the complexity of human interactions. Number 15. Helena Formant in her wedding dress. 1630. In 1630, in the 17th century, Pedro Pablo Rubens painted one of the most iconic works of his personal and professional life, Helena Formant in her wedding dress. This portrait is characterized not only by its masterful technical execution, but also by its intimate connection with the painter, since Helena Formant, the young woman portrayed, was his second wife and muse in his later years. In the portrait, Rubens uses a warm and luminous range of colors, showing the delicacy of the skin and fabrics, while emphasizing Helene's grace and youth. The composition focuses on her figure, radiating elegance and purity, a clear allusion to the traditional values of marriage at the time. The historical context of the 17th century was deeply influenced by the social and cultural changes brought about by the Counter-Reformation. Rubens, as a Baroque painter and a fervent Catholic, used his art to convey messages of optimism and spirituality. However, this work reflects a more personal and private approach, far removed from the religious and political themes that dominated much of his career. Helena, in her white silk wedding dress adorned with gold embroidery, represents a feminine ideal of the time: youth, purity, and wealth, all captured with exceptional technical precision. Rubens was a master of texture, and in this painting, the detail of the fabrics and folds of the dress is a testament to his unparalleled skill. Each embroidered thread seems to have a life of its own, and the way the light plays across the different surfaces gives a sense of three-dimensionality that only a Baroque master could achieve. This level of detail, coupled with Helene's serene and confident gaze, makes the work transcend mere portraiture and become a declaration of love and devotion. A fascinating detail of this painting is how Rubens incorporates subtle symbolic elements to celebrate their married life. For example, the bouquet of flowers that Helena is holding can be interpreted as a symbol of fertility and union. Furthermore, the carefully balanced composition and the gentle movement of the figure create an air of tranquility that contrasts with the dynamic and dramatic compositions typical of the Baroque. Number 14. The landing of Marie de Medicis in the port of Marseille. Around the years 1622 and 1625. Between 1622 and 1625, in the 17th century, Peter Paul Rubens created one of the most ambitious series of paintings in the history of art, the Marie de Medici series. The most notable piece in this collection is the landing of Marie de Medicis in the port of Marseille, a monumental painting celebrating the Queen's arrival in France in 1600 to marry King Henry IV. This historical event, although political in nature, was depicted by Rubens with a theatrical and divine touch, exalting Mary as an almost mythological figure, worthy of adoration and respect. The painting combines Baroque splendor with allegorical and symbolic elements. In the composition, Mary appears at the center of the scene, descending from her boat, surrounded by figures representing earthly and divine power. The presence of Neptune and the Nereids symbolizes divine protection of the sea, while the Renaissance architecture in the background reflects the cultural splendor of the time. Rubens uses a rich palette of gold, blue, and crimson tones to emphasize the grandeur of the moment, while the dynamic movement of the figures creates an effect of drama and celebration. The work was commissioned by Marie de Medicis herself to immortalize her life and legitimize her power as queen. In the political context of the 17th century, art was not only a tool of aesthetic expression, but also a means of propaganda to consolidate the power of European monarchies. Rubens, known for his ability to convey political messages through allegories, masterfully fulfilled this commission, combining his technical mastery with a deep understanding of the power dynamics of the time. An interesting detail about this work is how Rubens manages to balance the divine and the earthly in one scene. Although Mary is surrounded by mythological figures, her calm posture and direct gaze convey a sense of humanity and determination. This approach reinforces her image as a leader who, although favored by the gods, also possesses the human qualities necessary to rule successfully. Number 13. The Rape of Europa, circa 1628 and 1629. In 1628, in the 17th century, Peter Paul Rubens reinterpreted one of the oldest myths of Greek mythology, the Rape of Europa. This work, created around the years 1628 and 1629, shows the moment when Zeus, transformed into a white bull, seduces and abducts Europa, taking her across the sea to Crete. The painting is a classic example of the Baroque style, full of movement, emotion, and sensuality, distinctive characteristics of Rubens' work. At the center of the composition, Europa is depicted as a voluptuous female figure, characteristic of the canons of beauty of the time. Her dress, which seems to be blown by the wind, reveals Rubens' mastery in the representation of movement and the texture of fabrics. The bull, with an almost human gaze, reflects the duality of Zeus, while the figures accompanying Europa add dynamism and complexity to the scene. The vibrant color palette and the interplay between light and shadow reinforce the dramatic and romantic atmosphere of the painting. This myth, loaded with symbolism, was reinterpreted several times during the Renaissance and Baroque periods, but Rubens' version stands out for its emotional focus and attention to detail. In the historical context of the 17th century, European art was deeply influenced by the ideas of humanism and the exploration of classical myths as vehicles for reflecting on human nature and ideals of beauty. A fascinating detail of this work is how Rubens uses composition to guide the viewer's gaze through the scene. From Europa's gaze to the direction of the bull, every element seems to be in motion, creating a sense of continuity and narrative that captures the essence of the myth. Number 12. The Union of Earth and Water, circa 1618. In 1618, in the 17th century, Peter Paul Rubens created the Union of Earth and Water, an allegory celebrating prosperity and abundance as a result of the union of opposing forces. This deeply symbolic work depicts two central figures representing earth and water, surrounded by natural elements that emphasize the richness and fertility of their alliance. The balanced and harmonious composition reflects Rubens' technical mastery and his ability to represent abstract concepts through the human figure. The earth, represented as a voluptuous woman, holds a cornucopia, while water, in male form, seems to be pouring out riches in a constant flow. The interaction between the two figures symbolizes the harmony between natural elements, a recurring theme in Baroque art, which sought to convey messages of order and balance in times of chaos. In historical context, this work can be interpreted as a celebration of the peace and prosperity that Rubens yearned for in Europe, a region divided by religious and political conflicts. The inclusion of mythological and natural elements reflects the influence of Renaissance humanism, which saw nature as a source of inspiration and knowledge. An interesting detail of this work is how Rubens uses the play of light and shadow to highlight the textures of the bodies and natural elements. This approach not only reinforces the sense of three-dimensionality, but also creates an atmosphere of serenity and plenitude that complements the allegorical message of the work. Number 11. The Hippopotamus Hunt, circa 1615 and 1616. Between 1615 and 1616, in the 17th century, Pedro Pablo Rubens painted the Hippopotamus Hunt, a work that captures the intensity and drama of a real hunt. Combining realism with Baroque theatricality, this painting shows a group of hunters facing off against a hippopotamus and a crocodile in a fierce struggle for survival. The dynamic and chaotic composition reflects Rubens' ability to capture movement and emotion in a scene. Each figure, from the hunters to the animals, is depicted in stunning detail, showing the strength and tension of the moment. The color palette, dominated by dark and earthy tones, reinforces the dangerous and wild atmosphere of the scene, while the play of light and shadow creates an effect of depth and realism that captivates the viewer. In historical context, royal hunts were important events in 17th century Europe, symbolizing man's power and dominion over nature. Rubens, as a court painter, used this work to demonstrate his technical skill and ability to capture complex, action-packed scenes. A fascinating detail of this work is how Rubens manages to convey the tension of the hunt through the expressions and postures of the figures. Each hunter seems to be at the limit of his abilities, while the animals, especially the hippopotamus, seem to challenge their pursuers with impressive ferocity. This combination of realism and drama makes the work one of the most striking of Rubens' career. Number 10. Daniel in the Lion's Den, circa 1614 and 1616. Created in the 17th century, this Rubens masterpiece depicts one of the most striking biblical episodes, the prophet Daniel thrown into a den full of lions. The historical context in which Rubens developed this painting was marked by the rise of the Baroque, a style that sought drama, dynamism, and emotion, values that are reflected here in every detail. The work not only shows the artist's skill in capturing the anatomy and movement of lions, but also highlights his ability to convey serenity and faith in the face of Daniel, who remains in an attitude of prayer while the imposing and threatening animals seem to be subdued by a divine force. Rubens uses chiaroscuro masterfully, focusing the light on Daniel while shadows envelop the lions. This contrast not only draws attention to the main character, but also symbolizes the struggle between faith and adversity. The vigorous brushstrokes and warm colors enhance the drama of the scene, while the anatomical details of the lions reflect a deep study of nature. Each animal has a unique posture, which adds dynamism and variety to the composition. In Rubens' career, this work stands out for its combination of biblical narrative and technical mastery. His ability to bring such a complex scene to life reaffirms his position as one of the great exponents of the Baroque. The composition manages to balance the emotional tension of the story with the majesty of the pictorial elements, making it a testament to his artistic genius. A fascinating detail is the way Rubens humanizes the lions, giving them expressions that seem almost reflective. This could be interpreted as an attempt by the artist to show divine intervention in a visual language that was accessible to the viewers of his time, reinforcing the spiritual message of the work. Number 9. Samson and Delilah, around 1609 and 1610. Set in the 17th century, Samson and Delilah is a work that encapsulates the drama and sensuality characteristic of the Baroque. Rubens portrays the moment when Samson, asleep on Delilah's lap, is about to be betrayed, while a servant stealthily cuts his hair, a symbol of his strength. The scene is enveloped in an atmosphere of tension and deceit, with the dim lighting focused on the faces of the protagonists and accentuating the intrigue of the moment. Rubens employs an extraordinary use of color and texture to convey the sensuality of Delilah and the vulnerability of Samson. The use of sumptuous fabrics and meticulous details in embroidery and jewelry reflect luxury and decadence, while facial expressions and body postures subtly communicate the emotions of the characters. The figure of Delilah, with her calculating gaze, contrasts with the vulnerability of Samson, creating a complex dynamic that captivates the viewer. In Rubens' career, this work marks his mastery of visual narrative, combining biblical elements with a theatrical approach. The carefully balanced composition draws the viewer's attention to the act of betrayal, but also to secondary details, such as the expressions of the accomplices and the decoration of the surroundings, which enrich the story. The most intriguing detail is the symbolism that Rubens manages to include in the elements of the painting, from the presence of a lit candle, which could represent the fragility of life, to the contrast between light and shadow, which reinforces the struggle between good and evil. Number 8. The Garden of Love, from the year 1630 to the year 1635. Created in the 17th century, this work is a celebration of life, love, and sensuality, encapsulated in Rubens' exuberant style. The Garden of Love depicts an idyllic space where several figures, dressed in opulent attire, enjoy a bucolic setting filled with flowers, fountains, and statues. Inspired by the Renaissance ideal of combining nature with humanity, the painting stands out for its vibrant and festive atmosphere, typical of the mythological and allegorical themes that Rubens often addressed. Rubens uses a rich palette of warm, bright tones to capture the joy and vitality of the scene. The fluid brushstrokes and dynamic composition guide the viewer's eye through the many details, from the flirtatious gestures of the figures to the floral decorations that decorate the surroundings. Each character seems to interact organically with the others, creating a visual narrative that reflects the harmony and pleasure of community life. In Rubens' career, this work is considered a paradigmatic example of his humanistic approach. The inclusion of mythological figures and symbolic elements, such as the statues of Venus and Cupid, underlines the connection between earthly and divine love, a recurring theme in his work. In addition, the representation of textures, such as the softness of the fabrics and the transparency of the water, shows his technical mastery. A curious aspect of this painting is how Rubens incorporates elements from his personal life. Some historians suggest that the figures depicted could be inspired by people close to the artist, which adds an intimate dimension to this already richly meaningful work. Number 7. The Adoration of the Magi. from the year 1609 to the year 1629. Painted during the 17th century, Rubens's The Adoration of the Magi is a work that captures the majesty and mystery of the biblical tale of the Magi visiting the infant Jesus. The scene is full of movement and drama, hallmarks of the Baroque. The three kings, with their rich attire and exotic gifts, kneel before the child, while a multitude of figures and animals fill the space, creating a dense and lively composition. Rubens' technique shines in the use of intense colors and contrasts of light and shadow, which draw attention to the infant Jesus as the center of the scene. The characters' facial expressions and broad gestures add an emotional dimension that highlights the reverence and devotion of the participants. The artist also demonstrates his skill in depicting different textures, from the softness of fabrics to the hardness of metallic objects and the shine of jewelry. In the context of Rubens' work, this painting is an example of how he combined the influence of Italian masters such as Caravaggio and Titian with his personal style. The complex composition and masterful use of color and light make it one of the most iconic works of his career. A curiosity about this work is the level of detail in the costumes of the three wise men, which reflect a deep interest in foreign cultures and luxury objects, a subject that fascinated European society at the time. Number 6. The Massacre of the Innocents. From the year 1611 to the year 1612. In the 17th century, Rubens created The Massacre of the Innocents, a harrowing work depicting the slaughter ordered by Herod in search of the newborn Messiah. This painting is a striking example of Baroque drama and emotional intensity, with figures in frenetic motion and expressions of terror and despair dominating the composition. Rubens's color palette, with dark and warm tones, reinforces the atmosphere of chaos and suffering. The light, used strategically, illuminates the scenes of struggle and despair, creating a contrast that intensifies the emotional charge. Each figure is carefully drawn, from the soldiers with their violent gestures to the mothers desperately trying to protect their children, showing the artist's ability to capture the complexity of human emotions. This work is fundamental in Rubens' career because it shows his ability to address historical and biblical themes with a psychological depth that transcends the visual. His ability to combine anatomical realism with a powerful narrative positions him as one of the greatest artists of his time. A surprising detail in this painting is how Rubens manages to balance the chaos of the scene with a harmonious composition, guiding the viewer through the tragedy without losing the sense of structure and balance. Number 5. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus. 1618. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus, painted in 1618, is a monumental work by Pedro Pablo Rubens that encapsulates the dynamism and theatricality of the Baroque. Inspired by Greek mythology, this painting narrates the abduction of the daughters of Leucippus by the twins Castor and Pollux. Created in the context of a Europe marked by religious wars, this work served as a visual reminder of power and authority, recurring themes in the 17th century AD. Rubens organizes the composition with dramatic balance. The women's bodies, arranged on a diagonal, contrast with the strength of the horses and the determination of the men. The painter captures the tension between the young women's resistance and the vigor of the twins, creating a visual narrative that invites the viewer to explore every detail. The texture of the skin, the light that highlights the muscles, and the folds of the fabrics are a testament to his technical virtuosity. This work is especially significant in Rubens' career because it demonstrates his mastery of moving composition and his ability to integrate mythological elements with a deeply human aesthetic. The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus was a point of reference for later artists, who sought to emulate the energy and emotion captured in this canvas. As a final detail, Art historians point out that the horses in this work were studied by Rubens from real models, which adds a surprising level of realism to the composition. This meticulous approach reflects his commitment to perfection in all aspects of his art. Number 4. The Three Graces. From the year 1630 to the year 1635. The Three Graces, created by Pedro Pablo Rubens between 1630 and 1635, is one of the most emblematic works of Baroque art. This painting, created in the final stage of his career, celebrates feminine beauty and the exuberance of nature, recurring themes in his work. Set in the 17th century, after Christ, it reflects the rise of Flemish art as a manifestation of wealth and cultural sophistication. The work depicts the three daughters of Zeus, Euphrosyne, Talia and Aglae, symbols of beauty, charm and joy. Their naked bodies, painted with an almost tactile texture, are intertwined in a circular composition that suggests movement and harmony. Rubens uses a warm palette with golden and pink tones that highlight the sensuality of the figures. The idyllic landscape in the background, full of flowers and vegetation, underlines the connection between the graces and the fertility of the earth. This painting is a personal statement by Rubens about the perfection of the human body and its relationship with nature. At the same time, it is a demonstration of his technical mastery and his ability to convey emotions through form and color. The Three Graces is considered a key work in the transition from Mannerism to Baroque, and its influence extends to contemporary art. A curious fact is that Rubens painted this work on his rural property, Het Steen, where he spent his last years surrounded by tranquility. This explains the bucolic atmosphere of the scene and the attention to detail in the flora, which reflects his love of nature. Number 3. The Judgment of Paris. Circa 1636. The Judgment of Paris, painted around 1636 by Pedro Pablo Rubens, is a work full of mythology and sensuality that illustrates one of the most famous episodes in classical literature. Inspired by Homeric texts, this painting represents the moment when Paris, a Trojan prince, must decide who is the most beautiful among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. This mythological scene was created in the context of the Flemish court of the 17th century, after Christ, where interest in classical stories coexisted with the grandeur of the Baroque. Rubens composes the scene with dynamic harmony, placing the three nude goddesses in the center of the painting. Each one displays an idealized beauty that reflects different attributes: the majesty of Hera, the wisdom of Athena, and the sensuality of Aphrodite. The use of warm colors, together with the velvety texture of the skin, highlights the artist's technical mastery. In the background, pastoral elements can be seen that frame the scene and add depth to the landscape. This painting is not only a display of Rubens' artistic virtuosity, but also a testament to his ability to reinterpret classical themes with a personal approach. His depiction of female figures, full of life and voluptuousness, influenced later generations of artists and consolidated his reputation as a master of the nude. As an interesting detail, Rubens is said to have used his second wife, Hélène Formant, as a model for one of the goddesses, which adds a touch of intimacy and humanity to this mythological work. This detail connects the epic narrative with the painter's personal life, offering a new dimension to his artistic interpretation. Number 2. The Elevation of the Cross. From the year 1610 to the year 1611. The Elevation of the Cross, created by Pedro Pablo Rubens between 1610 and 1611, marks one of the most important milestones of the Flemish Baroque. Commissioned for the Church of St. Walburga in Antwerp, this work reflects the direct influence of his stay in Italy, where he studied the great Renaissance masters such as Michelangelo and Caravaggio. In the context of a Europe divided by religious conflicts, this monumental painting symbolizes the strength and sacrifice of Christianity, rooted in the 17th century after Christ. The tripartite composition presents a scene charged with movement and drama. In the central panel, Christ's body is lifted onto the cross by a group of men struggling with the weight of the wood. Rubens uses a powerful diagonal to emphasize the physical effort and emotional intensity of the scene. The anatomy of the characters, clearly influenced by the study of classical sculpture, is combined with theatrical lighting that highlights the tense muscles and heart-rending expressions of the participants. The significance of this work lies in its ability to fuse Italian artistic traditions with Flemish sensibility. Rubens achieves a perfect balance between the dynamism of the Baroque and religious devotion, capturing the viewer's attention and involving him in the narrative. This work marked the beginning of his prestige as a painter of large altarpieces, opening the doors to important religious commissions throughout Europe. A curious fact about this painting is the use of local models for the figures, which allowed Rubens to give his characters authenticity. In addition, the dog on the left panel, apparently a secondary figure, symbolizes loyalty, a detail that connects viewers with the moral values of the time. Number 1. The Descent from the Cross. From the year 1612 to the year 1614. The Descent from the Cross, created by the celebrated Baroque artist Pedro Pablo Rubens between 1612 and 1614, represents one of the most significant moments in his career. This work was commissioned for the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp, in the context of the rise of Counter-Reformation art in the 17th century AD. The painting, with its monumental composition and visual drama, sought to convey the profound pathos of the Passion of Christ, a recurring theme in Christian art of the period. 17th century Europe was a scene of religious and political transformations, and the Flemish Baroque was emerging as a key tool for reaffirming the values of the Catholic Church. Rubens employed a rich and vibrant palette, with warm, golden tones contrasting with the dramatic shadows that are distinctive elements of tenebrism. The central figure of Christ, depicted with striking realism, is surrounded by a group of figures who reflect a range of emotions: pain, compassion, and resignation. The distribution of the figures, arranged in an ascending diagonal, creates a dynamic movement that guides the viewer's gaze through the scene. The texture of the fabrics, the shine of the metal, and the anatomical details denote the painter's technical mastery. This work established Rubens as the undisputed master of the Flemish Baroque and set a standard of excellence for religious art of his time. His ability to combine technical virtuosity with deeply emotional narrative ensured his place in art history. The Descent from the Cross is not only a testament to his genius, but also to art's ability to move and transform the viewer. Among the most fascinating details of this work is the careful depiction of Christ's body. Rubens is said to have studied real cadavers in order to accurately capture the gravity of the inert body. This level of dedication allowed him to convey a sense of humanity in the divine figure, making the viewer feel part of the pain and hope of the scene. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.